Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Butterfly Effect podcast. And today, as from the result of our poll, we are going to be starting a brand new analysis series of The Wolf Among Us Season 1. I think it's very timely because we had some news on Wolf Among Us 2 recently. Will it be next year? We don't know. It's all a bit up in the air at the moment. But yeah, we're going to crack on with episode 1 titled Faith. But before we do have a special guest to announce who's going to be joining us for this series. None other than Liam's brother Luke.
Hello everyone, pleasure to be here.
Good stuff. So I feel like before we jump in, guys, I'm just going to say it as I see it, right? But I feel like you two are bigger fans of this game than I am personally. I mean, I've only played it once. It was back in 2015. I actually don't really remember that much. I remember having a good time with it, but I nonetheless don't remember too much of this game. But I'll start with you, Luke. What is it about The Wolf Among Us? Because I understand you're a big fan. What is it about this game overall that, you know, makes it one of your top tier games?
For me, it's just the style. It just really clicked with me. Like, I loved TellTale's Walking Dead. Like, I mean, everyone, season 1 of Walking Dead was like just a great game. But The Wolf Among Us, in terms of style and storyline, just everything about the genre of noir, the music, the color scheme, I don't know, it just appealed to me more.
Yeah, I think for me, it has a lot to do with the momentum that TellTale had back in 2012. Like, the Walking Dead game, as you mentioned, it honestly felt like ecstasy. I was absolutely obsessed with that game. So I was always going to buy whatever game they threw at me afterwards. Now, it could have absolutely flopped, and then I could have fell out with TellTale a lot earlier than I did. But I don't know, just everything about this game took all the good stuff from that game. But, you know, it was very different. So obviously it was very different from a zombie survival game, and we had this really cool, like, Sin City-esque Fable kind of thing. But it did a lot of unique stuff, and it added a lot of things as well, such as, you know, adding collectibles in the game, giving it its own kind of intro theme. And there's just a lot about Wolf Among Us that make people potentially argue that it might actually be better than the Walking Dead game. And it's certainly, I would say, they're the two strongest Telltale games to date.
The thing with Wolf Among Us is it actually helped me through a rehab recovery. So, just before COVID hit, I actually cut my finger on glass, and I had to have surgery on my finger. And I had to go to rehab to get my hand working again. And I don't know if anyone's been through that, but it's a really slow, frustrating process. I literally couldn't move my left hand. And I was getting really frustrated with just the ability of slowly getting my hand moving again. Then I realized Wolf Among Us was the one game I owned I could play one-handed. So I ended up gaming just Wolf Among Us as the only game I could play. And slowly, apparently the doctors said that in playing Wolf Among Us, my hand, left hand, slowly getting used to the controller, my recovery time was really quick. The Wolf Among Us actually, I think, saved my life. So that also is why it holds a special place in my heart.
Damn, I was not expecting that. Jesus Christ. Yeah, no, that's a really good backstory though. I mean, obviously,
one thing I want to add real quick, Jack, is that I like the way that people say that video games destroy people and promote violence, but this video game straight up saved someone's hand. So
yeah, no, that's mad. I mean, what we'll do is we'll start off with this first choice then. I mean, I've got it written down here. So, did you give Faith the money? And this is one thing, I'll say it before we'll carry on, is you guys might know this better than me, but I can't remember how far-reaching the choices are in this particular game. Obviously, we know it's a Telltale one, so I'm expecting them to not really matter that much. But I think because it's been so long since I've played it, I'm almost a little bit apprehensive. I'm sort of I don't know if this matters within the next episode or whether it reaches far to the end, etc. But yeah, I mean, we'll start off with that choice. I mean, did you guys give Faith your money?
I kept the money, just because I can't really remember my logic behind it. I know I played Bigby quite rough earlier on in the playthrough. I really went into be the tough cop. So a lot of my episode 1 choices were quite they were the bad choice, I guess, because I was trying to create a reputation of a cop that just got the job done.
Yeah, for me, I gave her the money. She had tits, basically. I was like a 17-year-old lonely kid She was always getting the money, Jack.
So I
mean,
think with that single choice, Liam single-handedly killed Faith almost a couple of scenes later.
I mean, yeah, I gave the money myself. Like, the woman's just been beaten, for crying out loud. Like, you know, she's going through a tough time. I was like, yeah, just take some money. I mean, that's the thing. It didn't really pay off. You know, no pun intended. But yeah, going where it goes later on. But I mean, we've got the next one here. Obviously, when we go back to the apartments, we see Beauty outside, but we then run into Beast. And having Beauty basically saying, "Oh, don't tell Beast where I am," and that is our next choice. So, Luke, did you tell Beast the truth about Beauty?
No, I lied just because Beauty kind of put me in like a awkward position and went, "Don't tell Beast." And the thing with this choice is I wasn't expecting how quickly I'll be called on it. I was like, oh, and maybe a couple of scenes time, this is going to come up, but it happened straight away. So I kind of panicked and just sided with Beauty, because what I know about interactive games is like if you make a choice, stick with it, because like when you have to do a choice, it tends to backfire. So I just doubled down on being Team Beauty.
For me, I did the same when I did my blind playthrough at the age of 17 or whatever it was. I definitely was like, oh yeah, okay, like I'm gonna go with Beauty here, and not just because she had tits, right? I think I did it because I was like, oh, she seems kind of like desperate, like she's in a sticky situation. I kind of bought her, like her desperation. But I feel like if I was to play it now, I feel like I'd tell Beast, I'd just be like, kind of watch the world burn a little bit, be like, nah, I'm with the bros on this one.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure this is interesting. So I'm pretty sure in the first playthrough, I actually stuck with Beauty, but in this one, I actually did stick with Beast because I felt like she obviously ran away anyway, right? So he doesn't know necessarily where she's gone. Some time passed before you ran into him. And I didn't feel like I necessarily revealed that much. It's not like I said where she went or anything. I was just like, oh yeah, I saw her a couple of seconds ago. So like, obviously I don't know where this can go, but if she does come up to me later on and starts, you know, acting all bitchy, like, oh, you know, you told him where I was, da 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 da, part of me is going to be like, well, hang on a minute, like, I actually, you know what, rewind a little bit. When she asked me, oh, what are you going to do? Are you going to tell Beast? I chose the silent is a valid option as a way of getting out of it. So I just said, fuck all. So I didn't actually promise her anything. So then when I saw Beast, I was like, oh yeah, like, yeah, she's she's out there. So she shouldn't necessarily be coming back at me later on. And weirdly, looking at the percentages, I was in like the minority big time because it says 18% here.
It's one of those ones, actually, as we kind of replay or rewatch these games, that I actually don't really remember where this little storyline leads. So yeah, like that's one thing that I actually kind of am in the dark with, despite the fact that I've actually played the game twice. So I'm really intrigued because I do not recall what happens to Beauty and Beast in this game.
Beauty and Beast are actually really interesting characters because they're in a really subtle way. They kind of always do the opposite thing to what you expect. And I think this is probably something we'll talk about more depth in like later episodes, because here you only really get to know them a little bit. But I actually really love what the show does with Beauty and Beast in a very subtle way. So yeah, no, stay tuned there.
Nice. I mean, we've now got I'll tell you what, before we move to the next choice, I've really got to jump in with something here because there is like a big reveal early on where we have a beheaded character. Obviously, spoiler alert, and we're going to say it anyway, but it's Faith. And I've got to admit, when I first started playing this game, because I come into it obviously having played Walking Dead Season 1, I thought that was great. A little bit of me was coming into this like, oh, it's going to be fairy tales, it's all going to be airy fairy. But as soon as I saw the intro to this game, and as soon as the beheading happened, it just had a level of maturity on it that I really wasn't expecting. So I'm almost glad that my expectations were, you know, completely flipped on their head at this one moment. So when we saw Faith's head there, I thought, bam, like, there's a potential murder mystery here. So like immediately my interest was like really gauged with this game. But I mean, like, guys, like, what did you think on like that particular moment, like when you pull back the sheriff's jacket and you see Faith's head there?
Yeah, like you said, I was absolutely blown away. But I mean, I remember, because I wrote this down on my notes. Like, actually, it was. I didn't know what to expect from this game. I kind of had in my head it was like a fairy tale murder mystery. So I don't think that surprised me. Maybe the fact it was Faith, but the bit of the game that threw me was just meeting Toad and then Colin the pig. And I remember thinking, like, I have no idea what this game's going to do next. Like, because I'm there talking to like a pig and lighting a cigarette for this bloody pig. And I just remember being like, right, this game could do anything. So I remember being shocked at Faith, but weirdly, it's like Toad and Pig that kind of threw me more.
I mean, for me, I was heartbroken there. That was my girlfriend right there. And yeah, her head was on my front step. It's never something you want to happen, right?
Well, Liam was looking forward to getting head from Faith, but not quite like that.
He's there afterwards. It's like, is there any change? Is the change here that I gave earlier?
Yeah. It's no pockets next to the head. God damn it. But now, one thing that I found really interesting about this game, though, is that like it really does stand on its own 2 feet. But because it's TellTale, there always is going to be that essence of like, the TellTale's Walking Dead game. And I think a major thing is the, just the fact there's a lot of the same voice actors come back. So like, you can just hit like the first voice is the radio guy, and that's just Glenn from The Walking Dead. You've got things like Bigby's clearly Andy St. John, Colin's Danny St. John. You've got like Faith at the start is Lily, and then like obviously the iconic one being TJ Clementine. So it's just like all these characters come back, and whenever someone would come on screen, it would almost be like a little treat getting to see what like that voice actor's doing now in this different game. So yeah, like that's just something that I weirdly quite liked. It was like a little Easter eggish thing, I guess. But yeah, I just wanted to comment on that.
I agree with you, but at the same time, I think they've always had to do such a good job that after the initial like, oh, that's Clementine, or oh, that's Andy St. John, I forgot about it quite quickly, because it's now that's Bigby, that's like Faith, and I stopped questioning it really quickly in the process.
But yeah, you know what? Like, honestly, coming back to what you were saying about Luke, of like Toad and Colin, going by episode 1, obviously this could change. They are my favourite characters. I think it's just like that. It is the unexpected nature of it. Like, you're giving this pig like a cigarette. You can give him some bourbon, like with Toad as well. Like, I think it's maybe it's like the bias, like the southeast England in me. Just like the accent. Like, he's almost like that sort of shady Del Boy type, where he's got a good heart, but there's like something that he could be quite amiss with, like he's doing something dodgy in the background, like you can't fully trust him, but it's also like he's not that bad of a guy, if you get me.
I love how British he is as well, when like say Bigby goes up the stairs at the start and then he's all smiley and then instantly like drops his expression and is like, tell me how to spend my money, and I'm just like, oh, it's so British. I love that.
Yeah. No, they honestly nailed like some of the characters, like early doors. They like, and definitely Toad, like obviously by like a family man as well, like looking after his son. Yeah, and Colin were definitely like the ones that were standing out to me. But
that's something I think The Expanse really messed up on, because here, like I know what you mean about how like Toad and Colin are like great characters, but also Bigby and actually Snow in her own way is really strong. And like, I just think The Expanse didn't get the specific characters. I wasn't as invested in them. And that's something that Wolf Among Us for me is head and heels over. I love every character in their own way. And that's what makes it a top tier game.
Because you get so many more interactions with these characters in The Wolf Among Us, don't you? With Expanse, they were really emphasising the exploring, whereas I feel like with Wolf Among Us, it almost got that better balance, because you had a bit where you'd go into each environment and you'd look around and pick up objects. It would immediately be followed by cutscenes or by opportunities to talk to the characters. And I think, it's really in those moments that the writing can start to shine and you can start to see these characters for what they are. So 100% agree on that.
I think one thing that I really think The Wolf Among Us nails as well, and I'm sure it's something we'll talk about throughout the other episodes, and it's something I sort of touched on the other day, Jack, when we did our Expanse ranking video, but like, I really like enjoyed playing as Bigby as the main character, because Luke touched on it earlier before, but you can kind of go good cop, bad cop in a way, and it kind of can like actually affect the people around you, how they perceive you. You can kind of be nice a little bit like Snow wants to, but then, you know, later on you might, you know, do that choice where, you know, you have the option to like maybe like I think you can like burn a plant in a later episode from memory, and you can like rip someone's arm off, and it's just like you can actually just be like really aggressive to get the results, kind of like a Luther-esque character, you know. And it actually feels like there's variety to the main character, and it actually gives kind of that levity and depth to your choices, which I feel like a lot of TellTale games kind of end up neglecting in a way. And Wolf Among Us just really nails it on the head with that, and it really means that, you know, when you do replayability, you know, replays of the game, you know, like there's a lot of value in doing that because you see so much more variety throughout the other paths.
And the thing with Wolf Among Us is maybe more so than any other Telltale game, it is quite linear. It's a murder mystery. There's only ever like one murderer. There's only one twist at the end that doesn't change. But because you have total control over Bigby Wolf and the character, and you can affect the relationships, it feels more interactive than any other Telltale game for me, just because of that. And that's another thing Expanse got wrong. I'm sorry to like keep on droning about to Expanse, but because that's fresh in my mind. Like they didn't make enough consequences from like the little decisions, like the way you treat Maya. Like if you sleep with her, don't sleep with her. It makes no bearing on the story. And it's even if it's just like a few offhand comments, because that's all Wolf Among Us does. Is just Beauty could be a little bit grumpy at you because you told Beast where she went. But like the Expanse didn't do like little things like that. And I think that's a credit to Wolf Among Us.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we'll move on to the next choice, which I've got here is whether you went to Lawrence first or Toad, because we do find out through the magic mirror and whatnot that Lawrence is Faith's husband or fiance. I can't quite remember. So yeah, guys, what did you do in this situation?
For myself, I remember on my blind playthrough when I was a teen, I'm pretty sure I went to Toad, but I guess I was just a bit like, oh yeah, animal in distress, that just called out to me, and I think that was the majority choice for a lot of people. But it's interesting because, as you know, we'll later learn, if you know, a lot of you guys don't know already, that there actually is probably more value in going to Prince Lawrence's flat first. How about you, Luke?
Yeah, I also went with Toad, and I think that's the wrong decision because, as you said, if you get to Prince Lawrence first, like I think there is more reward. But I just knew Toad as a character I already had a chemistry with as a player. I wanted to save him, and also I think what my brain said back then, or this was a few years ago now, Lawrence looked pretty dead from what the magic mirror showed me, whereas Toad was in danger. So I think I was like, I might not be able to save Lawrence, but I could save Toad. So I want to say that's why I picked that one.
It's interesting because I'm pretty sure in my blind playthrough I went to Toad as well, but literally exactly what you said, Luke. For this time round, because of what was on the magic mirror, I was like, I'm gonna go to Lawrence first, and that's literally what I was gonna ask you guys, like, does it actually matter? Because when I rocked up at Lawrence's place and I saw him there, because you think he's dead, don't you? I was thinking to myself, I wonder if it matters then, because if you go to Toad's first, I was almost expecting you to go there, do all that, then come back to Lawrence's and find him dead. But because I went to Lawrence's first and he was dead anyway, I was like, oh, maybe it doesn't matter. But then obviously he wakes up and you've got the whole scene where you look about, you find him blood, you find him the bullet on the wall, and then you've got one of the Tweedle brothers come in and you're hiding in the closet. And all I know, like looking from my things at the end, is that I'm sure that I managed to save Lawrence, and I don't know if it was because I jumped out the closet earlier to try and get at one of the Tweedle brothers, or whether it was because I went to his first rather than go to Toad's. So I don't know if like you're able to elaborate or like share on that, like whether you know if that is the case or not.
Yeah, I did quite a lot of research on it earlier. So apparently, yeah, like if you go there second, he dies. You have to go there first. But what's cool about going to Prince Lawrence's first is that there's a lot of variety where you can still die. You can actually just stay in the closet and you can get killed by Tweedledee. Or, you know, like another thing you have to do is tell him that Faith is missing rather than Faith is dead. Apparently, if you say Faith is dead, he can commit suicide then and there. So, yeah, which is cool because it's just like, you know, that there's a lot of variety in that scene alone. Like, he can still die, you know, his fate, you know, can like go to different, or, you know, multiple different ways. One thing I wanted to just quickly comment on is just how epic I think it is that they gave us sort of two sort of different paths. One example I can think of another game that does this is The Quarry, where you can either go down Rocky Road or Shady Glade. It's like one little thing, you know, and it doesn't really affect the path of the story too much, but I just think it's an effective tool these games that we like playing could like definitely use, where like, you know, you get one path, I get another, and we could just comment on it afterwards. Yeah, I don't think enough games really do it, and although I agree with Luke, the game is like fairly linear, I just think that is a nice little tool that I'd like to see more of. So yeah, no, I greatly appreciated the fact that we could do one or the other.
It's interesting what you said about Tweedledee being able to kill Lawrence, because I didn't know that. That's news to me. But I love how, like, if you catch Tweedledee and he's like playing the innocent man, but if you literally stay in the closet, you can see that that's not the case, and the plan always was to kill Lawrence. So that's actually like a really nice little bonus feature if you do that, although you've killed Prince Lawrence in probably the daftest way it is possible to kill him. You get that little kind of like knowledge of like, right, these guys are definitely villains.
That's insane. I didn't know that either. And it's funny because why I did this, I don't know, because if you saw my episode 1, I was literally playing good cop sometimes, bad cop other times, because when I was talking to Lawrence, he asked me about, you know, is this about Faith or something? And I just straight up lied. I think he was talking about the gunshot, and I just straight up lied to him. But now the fact that Liam, you just said that, like, if you're more honest with him, he can straight up commit suicide. It's weird. I feel more justified in lying to the guy and then also, you know, hiding in the closet and then jumping out at Tweedledee. Whereas in previous games, maybe like Life is Strange, where you're playing as Max in the, you know, and you're sort of hiding in the closet when Chloe's talking to David. Sometimes you could argue maybe staying in there is better, but actually like, jumping out was the right thing to do in that particular circumstance. So that's pretty interesting going forward. I don't know how much of a role Lawrence is going to play for me going forward, but yeah, I'll have to keep an eye on that one. So the next choice I've got here anyway, says that, well, Snow basically asks you who you think the culprit is, who you think the murderer is, basically. And I think I know who did it from my first playthrough, and I was cycling through and I couldn't find their name. Again, I could be wrong at this point. So I actually didn't pick a suspect, which is weird. Apparently that's that really minority verdict. Most people seem to pick someone. Did you guys, whether it's now or your first playthrough, obviously, did you have someone in mind that you thought did the killing?
Yeah, I said the pimp, just because as soon as this whole mystery went underway, like, it kind of heavily leans towards it's the woodsman. But I read that situation like, okay, they had a bit of a problem, but I'm just like, Bigby sent her off to a pimp with either not enough money or no money. And I'm just like, that surely is where we should be looking. And actually, I remember at this point in the story being quite infuriated that the story hadn't gone in that direction yet. And I know it does in episode 2 from like the next time sequence, but I remember being like, I don't think it's the woodsman at all. It's clearly the pimp. And I remember being quite set on that.
Oh, sweet. No, I mean, for me, I really don't remember what I picked in my blind playthrough. It was like a decade ago. But one little suspect that I did actually have, and it wasn't an option on there, is, you know, like when you sort of leave your apartment earlier or the office or whatever, there's just that like ginger guy outside you have a weird interaction with that you bump into in the hallway. And then later on, that same ginger guy is outside the office in the queue waiting with that other dude that you later on have a fight with. I just was like, this guy's shown up twice now.
This ginger guy, he shows up loads of times. And I thought he was going to be a bigger part in the story because he's also the taxi driver that drives into the trip trap. He's in the 2 moments you said, but I swear I saw him somewhere else. So when I literally just played it before this Discord, and I was like, this has got to be a big thing. But I'm pretty sure he's just an NPC. They couldn't be bothered to like put different costumes on. So I'm pretty sure like that's all he is like a stock civilian character that they used one too many times.
No, that's the thing, and like whenever I saw him, I'm like, yeah, see, it's got to be him. He's just in the background, and I was waiting for this big reveal, and then it never amounts to anything, unless he's like the big villain of Wolf Among Us 2, and then it's like a decade slow burner plot twist, and I'd love that. But for now, yeah, I just was like, I remember being quite gutted that like nothing ever came of him. But yeah, random ginger NPC, I just was onto him for no reason.
What do you mean? Well, I was fucking one of yes.
It was that and the missing cat poster. That's everywhere. I was convinced the missing cat was gonna like be not the killer, obviously, but like a part of it. And then that was another thing that didn't go anywhere. I think it was literally just like they created some background, like a background NPC and some background like decoration, and maybe used them one too many times. But because we were on the solving the mystery, kind of like that's where our brains were. I think we latched on to those two things.
That's like some like classic LA noir stuff there. Like it's always the rando in the background. Like, I know, quick side note, but I love in like LA noir, like the homicide cases, how like it's just this bartender that you come across like a couple of times. He's actually the homicide killer. It's not the person that's, you know, that you arrest for each case. But yeah, that's interesting because I've only remember seeing him once, and it was when you pass him in the apartment corridor. So yeah, like the fact that this guy pops up is weird. I don't really remember seeing him, but
he was an NPC, so you would have just like blanked him as though he was nothing.
Oh yeah. If he started, I'd have just, you know, kicked ass basically. He would have been done. I mean, I've got this final choice here, and it's basically, obviously it's the end scene, isn't it, where you have the fight and you get the choice basically whether you go after Tweedledee or whether you go after the woodsman.
Before that, you could rip the arm off or not of Grendel. That was another choice just before.
That is true, yeah.
I remember leaving it on because I remember like I played it a second time just to see what happens if I rip the arm off. So I know that maybe I played it quite bad cop all the way through, and I remember I kind of got a bit of a telling off from Snow for basically beating up Toad in front of his son. So I think that was the moment I was like, maybe I should kind of like hold off a little bit. So I kept Grendel's arm on.
Yeah, so for me, I actually did rip the guy's arm off. I don't know, I think it's because, I mean, you sort of said earlier that you went for a bad cop approach. My sort of thing throughout the game was I wanted to start off as this bad cop that gradually, like, working with Snow would bring out my lighter side, and then, like, I would become more of a good cop. So I thought this is kind of early episode 1 days where I'm still sort of, you know, green. So, like, I kind of, just, like, ripped the arm off. And I think there was that mixed with the adrenaline of having just turned into a wolf throughout the first, you know, for the first time. Because, like, throughout the episode, we see a few teasers, don't we, where the woodsman's beating you up, your eyes go yellow, and the woodsman's like, oh, I know you're in there. And, you know, we learnt about this whole thing with the glamour and stuff. So, like, I think the moment we finally become a wolf, I was just sort of like, yeah, I mean, this is what he'd do. And I kind of partly picked the choice I think would have happened, that Big B would have done. So yeah, I straight up ripped the guy's arm off, and he has such a badass line as well. He's like, you think I'm a lapdog, go fetch, and you throw his arm across the other side of the bar, and I'm like, oh, I love that. I'm kind of glad I did that.
Yeah, see, with me, you know what, I'm really surprised because this isn't listed as a choice at the end of the game, and I'm sort of looking at this choice as maybe more important than giving Faith money or not. So, but yeah, I mean, I do remember in my blind one, I definitely ripped the arm off, and I think by natural curiosity this time I was like, you know what, I'm not going to rip the arm off. But I'll tell you what, like, before we do go on to that final choice, what do you guys like make of the QTEs on this game? Because you don't necessarily, I mean, I know they're not difficult, you don't necessarily get a tutorial for them, do you? But do you think that they were like an appropriate amount of difficulty, you know, when you're fighting the woodsman and you've got the fight at the end?
See, I thought you might ask about this from watching your other videos. So I did make a note of this. And like, what I quite like is that they're quite chaotic. Like, it's always like very shaky, and actually it's quite hard. Like when it's like, right, you have to move the weapon to this area to hit. It's actually quite messy. And I remember against Grendel in that bar, I struggle with some of them, and actually I got kind of beaten up a lot until I turned into the wolf. And I don't know if it's just my imagination, but when you turn into a wolf, the quick time against events get slightly easier, almost like you're stronger now. I don't know if that's just me reading into it a lot, but if that is purposeful, that's really clever.
Oh, that is cool. Yeah, like I mean that would be cool if that was like, you know, intentional for sure. Yeah, I prefer the QTEs to say like the Walking Dead game. I don't know, in the Walking Dead game, like I guess it felt more tame. You know, it was just like, oh yeah, swipe left to avoid that zombie, swipe right. But this one, yeah, like I think maybe it's partial because the fights are going to be tougher because you're not against a slow zombie. You're mainly going to be like in bar fights, you know, and you're going to be struggling against a big tough woodsman. But yeah, right off the gate, you know, in the first 50 minutes, we're fighting this woodsman, aren't we? And like, yeah, like the QTs are just a lot grittier and truer. I feel like you say, you've got the shaking camera. It you know, reminded me of like some Quantic Dream games actually. And you know, the game, you know, I felt like brought a bit more gore to the front as well, and I just think it, you know, it married up really well.
Yeah, the fight that sticks out to me is not really a fight; it's the chase with Tweedledee. Like a part of me was like, I wasn't worried Bigby was going to get killed, but I was worried I might miss out on a clue, and that kind of added a stake to it for me. Like I was desperate to get every clue in the game, and I was worried I might miss out on some if I failed a QTE.
There are certain things that you both touched on there. The first one with like the difficulty and yeah, like moving the cursor across. Completely agree, Luke. There was time that I think even at the beginning of the woodsman fight, and actually the same with the what's the guy's name? Is it Gren? The other guy?
Grendel. It's Grendel from Beowulf.
Yeah, like I was having my ass handed to me at the start of them fights, and I was like, I've really got to switch on here. But like you said, Liam, with like the comparison with Quantic Dream, I find it more immersive. Isn't it a lot better than like the slow-mo QTEs where like everything just slows down and you feel like you've got an age to be able to hit the right button? When you've got a shaking cam, you've got all these colours hitting you, and you've suddenly got to swipe up, or you've got to move the cursor across, or hit a random button. It just adds to the drama and the excitement of it. So I completely get that. And as for the chase sequence, yeah, like I think there's a moment where there's a door that you're in like an apartment or something, and you have to like go out the window to get on some balconies. And I remember in the top left corner it said that he nearly got away from me, and I'm sat there thinking, damn, like it's just as well that I picked that when I did. Which again, it sort of reminded me of Detroit, you know, when you're on the rooftop chase and you can potentially lose the suspect. There's like these little details in there where even if the branching doesn't go that far, there's enough of an illusion for it to be, you know, it seems sophisticated enough for it to, you think, you know, you second guess yourself, like, oh wow, I'm glad that happened there, because otherwise I would have, you know, potentially lost out. So, I mean, coming to this last choice, who did you arrest, guys? Was it Tweedledee or was it the woodsman?
Tweedledee.
Yeah, it's got to be Tweedledee, right?
I've said I didn't really put much stock in the woodsman being a potential suspect, so on that was a really easy decision for me.
Yeah, I feel like it's because you had the heartfelt moment with him before where you kind of like, at the start you fight him, but then you feel like two grown men, you know, at the bar chatting. And, you know, he generally gave a moment of compassion that I generally believed when he's like, oh no, I didn't kill her. I know this looks really bad. And he's kind of teary, you know. And yeah, I just completely bought in him. And I kind of was just sort of thinking, I've had my interrogation with him. I'm ready to move on to another suspect now. So yeah, it was always going to be Tweedledee, or whichever one it was for me anyway.
Yeah, see, with this particular choice, I don't actually remember what I did first time round, but it did exactly. It felt more fitting to go for him this time after the, you know, the fight earlier. They just abandoned you out in the alley. And yeah, like with the woodsman, it's like, you know, like it is with anything, like whether it's a TV series or, you know, a film or whatever, I'm sat there as like the audience. The first person you come across, obviously in this case the woodsman, you're thinking, well, it's not going to be them then, is it? So I was sort of thinking, you know, almost a little bit ahead sort of thing, like, well, I'm not going to put too much stock in this particular character. These two twins have clearly got involvement with someone else. I think that's where the story, and to be honest, I think that's where the story wanted you to go as well. I'm literally looking at the choice here. And to be honest, it's quite surprising. Only like 52% picked it, so clearly a lot of people went for the Woodsman. But I feel like that's where they wanted you to go next. I feel like the Woodsman sort of had his time in the episode and in the story. But that concludes the choices. Is there anything in this episode, guys, that you maybe wanted to quickly chat about? Like maybe the title sequence, the intro?
I was just saying, I've got like a few notes, and one thing about like the intro sequence, in fact, all of it is like playing it just now. I was like, I wouldn't say it's bad graphics, but it's a touch outdated. Like if you put it next to Expanse, the Expanse is better. But because The Wolf Among Us is really clean with its like style, like the way the shadows really matter. Like you can tell when someone goes in and out of shadows, it holds up because it's done well with what it had at the time. And that, I think, makes Wolf Among Us like still like a really strong game to play today.
Yeah, it definitely stands on its own 2 feet, whether you're talking about just the music, like, my favorite one is the music that, goes on. It's called like Big B's Apartment. Like, I absolutely love that piece. And then you've got like, just the tiny things from the shading in the game to the font. Like, it really stands on its own 2 feet, and it was a really nice bold move and step away from The Walking Dead without, kind of like treading on its toes too much. But yeah, no, I mean, in terms of that intro, for me, yeah, I just absolutely love it. Yeah, I guess, did you call it outdated, Luke, or a little bit anyway?
No, well, I didn't mean it as an insult. I meant like you could just tell it was the year it was, but I still think it holds up because of the stylistic choices. And I would say that's one thing about TellTale. Like they market their games around what it is, and maybe that's another reason Expanse didn't really stand out to me, is because it didn't really do anything crazy with it. Whereas in Game of Thrones, it's almost like a watercolor painting in the background. With Wolf Among Us, it's like a comic. With Walking Dead, it's a little bit comic-y, and it has a style, and it's decided to be that.
No, for sure. I just really liked it because I remember, thinking like the Walking Dead game didn't really have it. I know they later kind of added that sort of thing to say like season 4, but like, yeah, just that intro, I just loved everything from the music, the walking through the street, like him with his like huff and puff smokes in his hand. Yeah, like I said before, it just really reminded me of Sin City, and I just really liked the noir style it went for. So yeah, like I don't think it took long for this game. Like I was playing it for a few minutes and I was like, yeah, I'm sold. I'm into this world.
I think it has, like, especially the intro, what sort of took me back first time, because obviously you get the nice typical like fairy tale intro, don't you, with like the once upon a time, so you get like some context. But I was like really taken aback by, like, I want to say it almost like had movie like qualities, just with like the different camera, like, if I'm talking about the very start, with like the different camera angles, and the way it would then cut to black and it would say like TellTale Presents, and it has like the studios, and then it cuts back to frame, and the colour palette, that's definitely one of the big draws for this game for me. And I completely agree, like when you say about like the shadows and stuff, it's the colours, like you think of the purples and the blues and just like the sort of the dim lights that come down on the street. I think it's just absolutely superb.
I noticed a little Easter egg, actually, that it's one of those things you only notice playing it a second time. But Ichabod Crane, when like he's shouting at you and goes, "I'm going to go and have a massage with Vivian." I mean, you don't know this at the time, but in a later episode, you find out that Vivian's one of the prostitutes. So basically, he's sneaking off to see a prostitute. And I thought that was quite interesting. Like, just one of those details that you only get on a second playthrough. That's just something I noted down.
Oh. You know what? Speaking of Easter eggs, I just love the little things that when I was like watching it, is, when Bigby's in his apartment and he opens up the fridge and there's like some pizza boxes and it says like Huff Puff on it. And obviously when you know about sort of the 3 little pigs and the wolf, the Huff and the Puff and all that sort of thing, it was great. And then like when you're arriving at the police scene, you've got like the glass slipper store or something like that. So there's like these little like fairy tale Easter eggs like littered throughout it as well, and you can just tell like whether it was what I was on about before, whether it was like the the color palette, the the pacing and stuff, but even like these little Easter eggs, you can just tell there was like so much care put into this game. And I think that's why like my expectations from where they were. It was almost handy having fairly low expectations going into it, so that by the time I finished episode 1, I was like, damn, like I'm actually right into this. Like I'm really looking forward to playing episode 2. So, I mean, on that note, we have almost come to like a cliffhanger of the of the podcast, really. But we're going to talk about the cliffhanger of the actual episode. I mean, did you expect it, guys? I mean, it must have took you away, surely.
I haven't been this surprised since someone agreed to marry you, Jack. It was quite shocking.
Oh, I wasn't expecting that one. That can stay in the edit.
I love how it kind of like makes it out like it's going to be Beauty, and like I completely bought that. I was just like, oh no, Beauty died, and I was thinking like, I mean, I knew it would have been a choice. I couldn't like change either way. I wasn't doing like Liam with Carly and like going back 8 times, but I was just like, Beauty, and like it's like very clear that she's been set up to be the next victim. And then, so when it's revealed to be Snow, I just remember being like, what? And it stopped there. And I mean, how long was the wait in between episodes back then?
2 months or something, right?
Tough 2 months.
Yeah, I was really shocked because I guess, like, again, I'm going to compare it to the Walking Dead game because that is sort of like, you know, TellTale. Walking Dead was my first TellTale game, Wolf Among Us was my second, right? That's kind of when I got into these games. If you compare them, I think episode 1, yeah, there was deaths in there, and like, you know, one of the big ones is Doug or Carly, right? But then it gives you a decent 10-15 minutes to debrief, and it ends at the motel, and the last line is, I think we're going to be okay, as a light dims, you know, and that it kind of lets you down gently before the credits come. This game doesn't do that. Like, it kind of like came a lot more out of nowhere, and the cliffhanger was a lot more mammoth. So yeah, like versus other experiences that, you know, you could compare it to, I just was completely blown away by it. And yeah, like it definitely hit me because like Snow, this really warm character who like, because like, let's face it, Bigby doesn't have too many allies in this story. You're kind of playing a bit of an anti-hero in a way, you know. A lot of people hold grudges, especially because of like the past, like Fable stuff, like blowing people's houses down, you know, going after like Little Red Riding Hood, that kind of stuff. So like, yeah, he doesn't have many allies, and Snow's the closest person who sticks up for you. So to see her head on your porch, it's you know, like, yeah, I was absolutely gutted by it.
And you think that's what the story is going to be about, like, oh my god, episode 2 is going to be Bigby without his greatest ally, and like you're just like, this mystery is going to get so much harder to solve.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like, you know, like you say, 2 months was the waiting point, and like back then the cliffhangers, you would have to wait a really long time. So that's like 2 months where I'm anticipating going into the second episode thinking like, oh yeah, we're going to be a solo Bigby. I just ripped someone's arm off. Like, I'm going to do 10 times worse now because like I was like, I'm going to go into episode 2 like angry, you know.
I feel like you could be forgiven as well because the way it sets itself up with, yeah, like Snow being at your side, you can almost imagine it being like, oh, you know, it's going to be these two trying to solve the mystery together, you know, man and woman sort of thing. She then goes off after like having this sort of meaningful chat in the taxi, and you don't realise like actually that's going to be the last time you see her. But you know what I mean? It's the fact that as well, like throughout this episode, she's been constantly trying to tell you to be a better person. She's always been that moral voice that's at your side. So like now that's been taken away from Bigby, it's sort of like, you know, what does this mean for him? He could go either way. He could sort of like go into sort of like a retaliation, vengeful mode where he just turns bad cop and that absolutely flips his shit, or he could like almost in her memory like start to make good decisions. So like it's a nice little thing for the player to like keep in mind going into episode 2. So it completely took me away, and I almost agree as well with like the way Beast turns up. It's almost suggesting that it's going to be Beauty. But yeah, no, it was a really strong opening episode, and it is the one that I remember the most. So I'm curious to see where it will go from episode 2 onwards now.
I was just going to say, I remember, like, from my memory of the game, I remember that episode 1 was the best one on a first playthrough. I think all the others were a bit of a slower burn because I think episode 1 was so strong out the gates, and all the other ones are a bit more like slowly sticking the mystery together. I want to say 2, 3, and 4 kind of didn't quite land as well, but I know that when I played them a second time, they really stood out. So I think that's going to be a theme with Wolf Among Us.
I feel as well with Telltale in general, the first episodes tend to be like they've got a lot less pressure on them because you don't know the extent and the consequences of the choices and how much they matter. So like when you're playing a Telltale game early doors, it's like it's this really magical experience. I mean, a lot less so now though that you've played so many and you've kind of sussed the formula. It's something I always tend to say. But yeah, I remember like back then kind of playing episode 1 of these Telltale series, they used to feel, you know, euphoric basically.
One thing I was going to say before we go, I noticed with the next time, like there's a lot of scenes in the next time that aren't actually in episode 2. Like, and I almost found that a bit weird. It was almost like, I know Telltale like were still making the game when they released episode 1. So it's quite interesting to see that clearly they changed some of their ideas after episode 1's release.
Damn, I didn't know that. That's so weird though, to think they were still making the game while releasing episodes. Like now, I mean, you can see what the problems like that they've clearly been having even now, but to think they were doing that back then, like Jesus, like that must have been so stressful for like their work, you know, for all that other people working on this game. All right, sweet guys. So that was the analysis for The Wolf Among Us episode 1 titled Faith. Let us know what your choices were in the comments below, and we will see you next Sunday where we'll be doing episode 2, Smoke and Mirrors. Take care. Catch you later.
See you soon, guys.
Thanks for having me.